Hello, I'm Bob Harris. Unfortunately, not every concrete substrate is a good candidate for a decorative treatment, whether you're score cutting or staining. So as an alternative, you might want to consider the use of a stampable overlay. Now these are some awesome products, and typically you can put them down roughly from about a 1/4 inch in thickness all the way up to about 3/4 of an inch. Check with your manufacturer's specifications. The nice thing about a stamp overlay is you can get a nice build, and it allows you to texture it, whether it's with a seamless texture skin, or in our panel here, we're going to be using a pattern stamp, and it's going to be a serpentine cobble. Really effective. A couple of observations before we get started. You want to always read their technical guidelines on how to prepare the surface. Some may require a light concrete surface profile. We call that a CSP. Also, what we like to do to really take our projects over the top is use what we call transition strips. You can get this is actually a Schluter strip, and it's in a brass or a bronze color. You can get them in silver, and certainly whatever thickness that you're pouring your stampable overlay is the thickness or the height that you want to get your transition strip. Now, where would you consider using a stampable overlay? Gosh, there's a multitude of applications. We use them all the time on interior homes, on their finished floors. We use them in basements, pool surrounds, pool decks, patios, driveways, you name it. It's a very durable material when used properly. This manufacturer packages their liquid polymer, or their catalyst as they refer to it, in a 5-gallon bucket, and they have a convenient tint cup that you simply pour into here. What you want to do is pour the pigment, shake it up, pour it into here, get a little bit more liquid and shake it back up so you get all of the remaining residual pigment to make sure you're getting a thorough coloring. Dump it in here, we stir it up for say 30 to 40 seconds, and then from here we go ahead and decanter 1 gallon into our metal buckets. Now on the subject of metal buckets, if you're mixing this on small projects like we are today, I do like to use metal simply because sometimes I've had it where we're using 5-gallon plastic buckets, and depending on the mixing paddle that you're using, it hits the side of the bucket and actually starts to shred and pull chunks of the bucket. So the metal, you don't have that problem. Now on much larger projects, we've done some 3,000 and 4,000 square foot basements, for example, recently. We're using a mortar mixer, so you're mixing 5 or 6 bags at a time, and you're wheelbarrelling it in. So for much larger projects, you want to consider using a much bigger mixing device like a mortar mixer. So Ron has already got his 1 gallon of mix in there, and we're going to go ahead and dump this white powder, the stampable overlay, into the mix and get busy mixing. Once you've obtained your proper concrete surface profile, there's a couple of ways that you can address this concrete surface. This manufacturer recommends either SSD, which stands for Saturated Surface Dry. That's where you keep the concrete damp or moist for a minimum of 1 to 2 hours, so it totally saturates the concrete, and then you can install their overlay. Or in our case, and this is my preferred method, is what we've done is we've used a priming catalyst that we put down 1 coat, and now as you can hear in the background, we're mixing our overlay. I'm going to put down another coat, and it's really important that I put our fresh overlay into a damp surface of a primed concrete surface here. On a much larger project, what we would be doing is we would go to about right there, stop priming, dump our overlay so it's a wet mix into a wet primed surface. Typically on a large job, I'm going to have 1 person that's applying the primer and also gauge raking, which is what I'm about to show you. So you never want to just prime the whole surface and have it dry and then start with your overlay installation. So let's go get our first mix. This tool is called a gauge rake. You can see it has adjustable ears on either side of the gauge rake. You simply loosen these little screws here and you move it up or down depending on the thickness that you're putting it. Now on the subject of the thickness, what you want to do is take into consideration the deepest part of the stamp pattern that you're using. So for example, if you have a stamp pattern that after it's stamped it depresses about say a quarter inch of texture into the surface, you want to double that in the thickness of your overlay. So if your texture is a 1/4 inch thick, you want to apply your stamp overlay a minimum of a 1/2 inch thick. It is important to check with your manufacturer's technical guidelines in terms of how you finish this material. But most of the time what happens in the industry is people will either finish it with a Fresno, which is fine, but the problem that I have with that, if you're doing a big open area, it's very difficult to push the Fresno out, and when you return the Fresno to you, not get a little depressed line right there. So a lot of installers will use what we call a funny trowel, or I'll simply lay it down with the typical hand trowel. Now I'll get a big 20 to 24 inch pool trowel, and you can really cover some large areas. Really important, regardless of the finishing tool that you're using, on this type of material, you only want to hit it one time. And what happens is, if you keep going over it and over it, it'll start to get what we call density blisters. Density blisters are trapping air and moisture, and they try to rise to the surface, and unfortunately you're going to see blisters. So if I'm out on a project and I see the installers complaining about getting blisters, 9 times out of 10, it's because they're over troweling it. So I can't stress the importance. Trowel it one time, stay off of it.